Good morning and welcome back to another Duval 22 podcast. My name is Gus Logue. I'm thrilled to be joined this morning by Mia O'Brien of ESPN Radio. She also hosts a show called Club 904 on Action News Jax. Mia and I used to work together at 1010XL Radio, so it's great to, as always, to kind of link up again and talk Jags, talk ball, Mia. So thanks for coming back. How was your holiday season?
It was good. It was very restful, but we are back in full swing with not only college hoops. I've got three games on that front this week as well, but of course, a Jaguars playoff push, even if no one in the locker room wants to use the word playoffs at this juncture.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Liam Cohen said after the game on Sunday that like he hasn't addressed goals with the team at all. Like I think it's always like an unsaid goal of any team that they want to win the division. That's always kind of paramount because you're always worried about your division. And obviously, if you win the division, you do get into the playoffs. But he said even after the week before when they beat the Broncos, they clinched a playoff berth with that win, and they still didn't really talk about it. They're just taking everything one week at a time, which is certainly a good mindset to have. Liam actually expanded on his uh, acronym or message or whatever you want to call it called cleats, which basically means just like be where your feet are and just be in the moment. Again, take each game one at a time. And obviously it's working as the Jaguars have won seven straight games. They are now 12-4. They're currently projected to be the number three seed, which could, I think they have a chance to be really like technically, they have a chance to be any seed in the playoffs except for number four, I think. But they'll probably be, I'd say, the two or the three seeds since they're playing the Titans this week. But long story short, Mia, I do want to touch on this most recent game that the Jaguars played up in Indianapolis. They were able to beat Philip Rivers and Shane Steichen 23-17. Any takeaways that you have from the game, Mia? Like what stands out the most from you from Jacksonville's most recent win?
So first and foremost, I promised you I had a surprise, and I forgot if I had shared this with you when you asked me to come on the show. I actually was calling the University of North Florida men's basketball game during the Jags Colts game, and
Okay.
so I was the source for everyone in that building, which included Todd Golden's two children who were watching behind me because they were there supporting former longtime Gator, not long time, but 3 year assistant, longtime Todd Golden assistant Kevin Hovde, who's now the head coach of Columbia, who was playing UNF.
Hmm.
So yeah, everyone in the arena was watching my laptop as I am calling the basketball game in front of me, which was a wild experience and obviously something I had never experienced before. And while UNF didn't get the win, the Jags did. And I think it's a testament. And my biggest takeaway being that the Jags won ugly. And it's crazy to say that in a world in which this is largely, with some notable exceptions, the same roster that averaged just 18.8 points per game a year ago and scoring 23 and turning the ball over two times, one of which was a bit of a fluky lateral play. It's wild to hear me say that that is winning ugly, especially when the Jaguars were basically down 10-0 from the jump in this ball game. And so it's proof of concept that the Jaguars can win in a variety of ways. So many around the league nationally, many of my contemporaries at ESPN have said that this was the classic trap game, especially coming off of that mile high victory and one that had the Jaguars feeling a mile high emotionally after defeating the number one seed in the AFC and the Denver Broncos. And so the fact that the Jaguars were able to go on the road, handle business, as Liam Cohen told his team post game, a win's a win. And so for me, this is a type of game that a previous iteration of this franchise or this team, I should say, would have lost. They didn't lose. And that is a testament to the culture that Liam Cohen has built on a day in which, quite frankly, his play calling may have been one of the weaker links in the entire operation, but it doesn't matter because the infrastructure is so sound at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that definitely is the top takeaway is that it was just a grown-up win by the Jaguars. And it's especially impressive, like you said, because it would have been very easy to kind of come off of that win in Denver and be a little bit deflated coming off, like you said, that mile high vibes. But as you said too, like it's been an assortment of caliber or types of wins amid this seven-game streak. They had the blowout against a really good playoff team in the Chargers back in week 11 to kind of start the streak. They had multiple overtime thrillers. They beat the number one AFC playoff seed in Denver at their own house. So they've
By
won
two touchdowns, by two
by two
touchdowns. Don't
touchdowns.
forget, don't forget that part, Gus. I think a lot
They
of people nationally are forgetting that part.
they've won pretty much any way you'd want, but they also like they did have those squeakers out west against the Cardinals and the Raiders. But generally, like they haven't really been close games because the Jaguars lead the NFL in point differential by a pretty wide margin since week 11. Their streak of 25 plus points scored did come to an end in Indianapolis because they just put up 23. But the Jaguars did set a franchise record for most points scored in a season. And so that isn't even like shocking. I mean, obviously, it's a awesome accomplishment, but like because of the work that Liam Cohn has done on the offensive side of the ball, we like could have kind of half expected like some offensive records to be broken this year, especially kind of considering the history of offense in Jacksonville, especially in the last 25 years. But yeah, still really impressive. Liam Cohn became the first time head coach in NFL history to win 12 or more games after taking over a team that won four or fewer games the previous season. So he's making history. Trevor Lawrence, this one of my takeaways from the game, Mia, was just the value that Trevor Lawrence's legs add to the game, to the offense for the Jaguars. And obviously, we've seen that kind of amid this 7 game winning streak is Trevor using his legs more, especially in kind of critical situations like third or fourth and short, goal line situations, really gotta have it situations. The ability for Lawrence to use his legs and kind of even up the matchups, get like have an extra body kind of in the run game, create a numbers advantage is super helpful. He had 2 rushing touchdowns against the Colts, which brings him up to 23 rushing touchdowns in his career. The only quarterbacks with more rushing touchdowns since 2021 are the reigning MVP Josh Allen and tush push merchant Jalen Hurts. And so pretty impressive stuff. That was just Lawrence has got to keep running. I don't know if we're going to see it a lot this week against the Titans because I think hopefully we'll see like an amazing first half and then like they can rest their guys and like just have not be as healthy as they can entering the playoffs. So maybe we won't see a lot of scrambling and running from Lawrence this Sunday in Week 18, but I think during the playoffs, absolutely we're going to see a lot more of Lawrence, not just scrambling around and kind of like creating something out of nothing with his legs, but also being used on designed rushes, especially again in goal line and kind of short yardage situations.
The hope is that because it's at Everbank Stadium, and of course, the hope is that it's a jam-packed bank, that the Jaguars, yes, will be able to largely have this one in hand by halftime. But make no mistake about it, Gus, and I've heard this from multiple people inside the building. That may be a team that just picked number one overall in the NFL draft and is going to be picking in the top 10 again in the Tennessee Titans. But that is also a top 10 defensive front. Jeffrey Simmons is playing better than arguably any other defensive tackle in the National Football League as of this writing. And so to that point, I do think the Titans once again will be able to stop the run largely, especially with the Jaguars offense, quote unquote, struggling in the run game, which is hilarious when Travis Etienne is averaging 4.5 yards per carry against Indianapolis. Quite frankly, he only carried the ball 17 times. Like, it's not like he carried it 30 some odd times and it was a bunch of tough running. The Jaguars offense has proven that it can be multidimensional, although it's not leaning on the run as heavily as it did early on in the season, just because the passing game has been so sound, because the drops haven't been there outside of Brian Thomas Jr., story for another time. Parker Washington had a drop as well in the middle of the field against the Colts, but we won't go there. Point being, Gus, I hope that the Jaguars will be able to rest Trevor Lawrence in the second half of Sunday's regular season finale. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he's resting in the second half, but that's after scoring 2 rushing scores because he's been so good against the blitz. He's been so good when the Jaguars' run game has been bogged down in finding outlets to escape and take those running lanes himself and capitalizing on them, especially in this 6-7 week span.
Yeah, his performance against the Blitz, I'm glad you brought that up because it's been incredible during this like 7 game winning streak, but especially the past 2 weeks. The Broncos like were trying to pressure four, and like Trevor took 2 sacks on third downs in the first quarter, and so like they were kind of getting after him a little bit, but then he led a touchdown drive and was pretty successful for the rest of the first half. So Denver was like, all right, like if we keep sending four, like they're just gonna march up the field to us or march down the field on us. So we got to start heating up Lawrence and starting to try to create some negative plays to get them off the field. And that just completely backfired and was even worse. And we kind of saw a similar thing with Indianapolis. They were actually blitz heavy the entire game. It was their second highest blitz rate of the season. And the only game that they had a higher blitz rate was in Week 15 against the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence and Nick Mullins also got snaps in that game. And I think it's like I wrote after the Denver game like a column on Duval22.com. You can go read it. And the headline was "Do not blitz this guy." Like Trevor Lawrence is like in that tier of quarterbacks. It's like it's just not a good idea because he's too smart. Like everyone knows he has the arm, but he's also too smart to like blitz against because like you just can't give him a numbers advantage. You know, take advantage of it. But Indianapolis, I think that like it's not that they were like they're dumb and they're like, oh no, like we think we can get after Trevor Lawrence because he's not very good. It's not really about Trevor Lawrence. It's about again what the Denver Broncos thought of like if we just rush forward and kind of sit back and play like a quote unquote bend don't break style of defense, then like we're gonna get bent over and like we're gonna get marched down the field. And so we have to invite chaos in some way. And so it's also, I think, goes in hand with the interior offensive line with like Robert Hainsey and Patrick McCarry both being out this week for the Jaguars. Indianapolis was definitely sending a lot of pressure up the middle. And so it'll be something to monitor going forward. I think the Jaguars will continue to be blitzed in week 18 and then through the postseason. So how they're able to handle it could potentially make or break their postseason run. Before we move on to just other more Jags talk, last thing on the Colts Jags game, I do want to get your thoughts on kind of like the Philip Rivers experiment, and kind of both Philip Rivers and like Sauce Gardner. Like, do you think that
Mhm.
in hindsight, like what should Chris Ballard have done differently, if anything?
I mean, I think he should have been fired a couple years ago, but that's just
Yeah.
me. When Trent Baalke and Dave Caldwell have more AFC South titles than you do in a 9+ year span as the general manager of a franchise, you have a problem. Sorry, Chris. Shout out to Dave, not Trent. But anywho, with that said, I do think that look, when you give up 2 first-round picks for a corner who is maybe you're buying low because he is coming off of subpar back-to-back seasons and has been nowhere near the astronomical numbers that he put up in his rookie and second year campaigns in the National Football League. Like I don't blame Chris Breer or Chris Breer. I don't blame Chris Ballard for pushing all of his chips to the middle of the table because he felt like this was the window.
hmm
But at the same time, you've been an NFL GM for 9 years. You need to understand that this is also not the window because you had the toughest part of your schedule still to come, which I guess is why you go out and you get Sauce Gardner. You try to inject life into this team. You have a quarterback, though, on a 1 year contract. The expectation, yes, was that you'd re-sign him, but you'd have to pay him handsomely. Now you're incurring the contract of Sauce Gardner on your books. The whole thing, in my opinion, and our friend John Shipley, I know, has exhausted this point to the point of nauseum on social media. None of it made sense from the jump. I did not get playing Sauce Gardner against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I understand he's a football player and he wants to play. He had one full practice in the last month. That alone says to me all I need to know about the operation in Indianapolis. Like, you're already eliminated from the postseason. Protect the player from himself. Then he exits this game with a calf injury. I haven't seen an update yet just because we've moved on from that game largely here in Jacksonville. But yeah, I feel bad for Shane Steichen, Gus, because I do think he is a coach who at 25 and 25 in his 3 year tenure hasn't gotten the credit that he should. I think he did early on this year because the Colts were everyone's favorite darling in America at an 8-1 record with Daniel Jones as their quarterback. But ultimately, I do think what you need to go back and look at with Shane Steichen, if you're the Carly Ursay Gordon and the Ursay sisters, who are now the controlling owners of this franchise after the untimely passing of their father last year, I truly think that Shane Steichen does deserve another year. But the problem is, I don't think you can continue down this path with Chris Ballard. But who's going to take this job when you don't have a first-round pick for the next 2 years? By the way, you're now pigeonholed into re-signing a quarterback who is rehabbing from a torn Achilles and maybe is going to be ready for opening day, but you can't guarantee that. And so it's a minefield that I'm very glad the Jaguars do not have to navigate. And for the Jaguars to be one of the less dysfunctional franchises in the division, let alone the entire conference, a welcome sight for sore eyes.
Yeah, fortunately for Jaguars fans, history has not repeated itself after a decade plus of being beaten to a pulp by Peyton Manning and the Colts and not being able to find a franchise quarterback of their own. Now they've got Trevor Lawrence, and the Colts have the corpse of Philip
One-legged Daniel
Rivers.
Jones. One-legged
Yeah,
Daniel Jones.
I don't hate the Sauce Gardner trade like at the time and even now in hindsight, just because like I agree with everything that you said, and like Chris Ballard should have been fired a few years ago. He should have been making like more aggressive moves to create a Super Bowl window years ago. But at the same time, like this is the best Super Bowl window that the Colts have had since Andrew Luck was wearing their uniform, at least. And so like like you said, I don't blame Chris Ballard for pushing his chips into the middle of the table. Like the whole point of the sport is to throw a parade and win a Super Bowl. And so if like you're gonna get closer to that by trading for Sauce Gardner, then great. Like the hang up really was definitely just the fact that the fact that they were trading away two first round picks meant it was like a vote of confidence in Daniel Jones. But again, like I don't hate the Sauce Gardner trade. It was might have been done at like kind of the wrong time. They were definitely like I feel like they weren't even buying low on. I feel like they're buying high on Sauce Gardner somehow because like even if he's had a couple of down years, like two first round picks, like you're paying for like what you think Sauce Gardner showed as a rookie when he was an All
Right.
Pro. But again, I don't hate that. I do hate bringing in Philip Rivers because that was like kind of my biggest takeaway from the Colts Jags game is like just how sad is this? And like it was even more sad just the fact that the broadcast wouldn't stop talking about like him and his family and his high school team and like it's an remarkable feat. Like I can't understate how impressive it is for a 44-year-old to come out of 5-year retirement and play three NFL games and like be pretty close to winning. But at the same time, like it would be cool if it was like the 3-13 Titans did that and it was like a fun story. But instead, the Colts go 0-3 with Philip Rivers, who can't complete a pass more than 10 yards downfield. And not just 10 yards downfield, but 10 yards like to the sidelines. Like throwing to the sideline in the NFL is not easy because of the width of the field, the length of the hashes. Like you got to chuck that thing out to the sideline, even if you're just throwing like to the flat and it's not that far like down the field. And so Philip Rivers, as we saw on Sunday, like clearly just could not throw deep and could not get the ball to the sideline. Just a sad, sad state of affairs there. I don't know how they believed that he would A, like get them to the playoffs, but then B, even if he did get them to the playoffs, did they really think he was going to win like four straight games in January and February? I 100% would have started Riley Leonard, who I thought actually looked pretty good for a six-round rookie when he came in for Daniel Jones against the Jaguars back in week, I forget it was 14 or 15.
Yeah.
But he looked pretty solid. I would have just started the rookie, especially because he A has an able body, but B can like actually give you something with his legs too. I think it would have been an interesting rushing tandem between him and Jonathan Taylor. And so, yeah, I just want to get that off my chest. I
Yeah.
don't hate the
And
Sauce Gardner trade, but like Philip Rivers should have stayed home for sure.
yeah, cosign to that. Philip Rivers average yards per completion against the Jaguars, 4.9, less than 5 yards a completion. I think what was astounding to me, Gus, was the fact that the Jaguars didn't account for the fact that he can't throw more than 10 yards downfield on the opening drive of the game. The fact that they
Yeah.
allowed the Colts to just run wild with Jonathan Taylor. But on the flip side of that, maybe it is a fireable offense that then Shane Steichen, after giving Jonathan Taylor the football 11 times in the first two drives of the game for Indianapolis, he gave him one carry the rest of the first half. And then he had 9 carries for 19 yards in the second half. That was his fewest second half total since week one against the lowly Miami Dolphins. Maybe not so lowly anymore, but that's another story for another time. The Philip Rivers of it all, for me, I was just exhausted by the storyline by basically the time they kicked the ball off in Seattle for the first game for his
Yeah.
return with the Colts. At the same time, in speaking with some of our contemporaries, we had Mike Silver on the Club 904 podcast, and for Silver and some of the more veteran reporters nationally, they felt like this was at the very least Philip Rivers finally getting the swan song and the proper tribute that, number one, he did not get in the COVID 2020 season, which was his final season up to the last 4 weeks. And then number two, a player who may or may not make the Hall of Fame getting the recognition he deserves as a top 6, top 7 quarterback of his era during an era that might go down as the golden era for quarterback play in the history of the National Football League. And I respect that. I also think it was the weirdest Hail Mary of all time. And it also should give Cleveland Browns fans, what is she saying? Cleveland Browns fans, it should give you more, just more like full hearts when it comes to what Joe Flacco did 2 years
Mm.
ago. Like Joe Flacco coming off the couch and doing what he did with Kevin Stefanski. was proof of concept for Shane Steichen and Philip Rivers of, oh, these two work together in San Diego. They already have chemistry. Maybe lightning can strike twice in a different locale. But no, Philip Rivers, not Joe Flacco. Shout out to Joe Flacco, who was 4 years younger at the time, but still. Both
Yeah.
old enough to be Anthony Richardson's father, and both teammates of Anthony Richardson at some point here in the last 3 years.
All right, let's get back to some Jags talk. We've talked a lot about Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence, I feel like especially. We talked about Philip Rivers too, so we've hit a bunch of kind of like national headlines. But me and my next question for you is like, who or what is flying under the radar in Jacksonville? And especially like from a national perspective, because I think Jaguars fans are pretty attuned to like guys like Danny Strigow and Cole Van Lanen and like important role players who have like really showed up, especially during this 7 game winning streak. So at least from a national perspective, like what do you think is going under the radar with these Jaguars?
Yeah, well, first off, as Josh Hines Allen eloquently put it last week when we spoke with him last Wednesday, Devin Lloyd was snubbed from the Pro Bowl. I don't think I'm
Mm,
breaking any news when I say that.
yeah.
Foye Oluokun continues to be snubbed by the national media and by the voters when it comes to postseason awards. So I'm not breaking any news there, but I do think that the duo has been as good as they've been during their 3 year, 4 year run here together. And while there have been perhaps some critiques of, oh, Foye doesn't look as fast as he used to be, he's still the highest IQ player, in my opinion, on that defensive front. Like, in my opinion, like there is no one who you would want to give the keys to the operation to more than him. And Lloyd has made massive strides in a contract year, not because it's a contract year, not because the 5th year option was not picked up, but because under Tem Lukabu's tutelage, under Anthony Campanelli's tutelage, he is finally back in a similar system to what he ran at Utah, where he has one assignment on each play. Maybe he has to drop in coverage on one play and then he's rushing the passer on the next play. But there's no options. There's no, well, if this happens, do this. But also, if this person doesn't do that, then do. His head is not in a beehive anymore. It is very simple, but simplicity is beauty when it comes to Devin Lloyd and how this Jaguars defense has gone up to this point. I have a couple stats pulled up for two players who I do think should deserve more love nationally, and we'll get to them here in a second. But big picture, those two players who, spoiler alert, it's Jarian Jones and Monteric Brown. I
Yeah.
think Jarian eventually could become a national household name. I don't think Buster ever will, but that's okay because I do think he will get paid, in my opinion, by this regime and will be in Jacksonville for the long term. And there's nothing wrong with being a quiet corner. But we'll get to that here in a second. The player we need to be talking about nationally is Trayvon Walker. And it's not just because his classmate in the 2022 NFL draft, Aiden Hutchinson, and the Detroit Lions have been eliminated from the postseason. It's the reality that Trayvon Walker is the straw that stirs the drink for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Against the Colts in particular, it was fascinating to see how many different assignments in the same drive Campanelli and the defensive coaches gave to Trayvon Walker. At one point in time, he's lined up at a wide 9. On the very next play, he's at a 4-eye. He's shading over the tackle, but then Dennis Gardick is lined up at that wide 9. And so there's options there. It's funny. I just talked about Devin Lloyd. You had to take the options away. Trayvon Walker, they're putting even more on his plate. If it's a run play, he stays inside. If it's a passing down, then they twist and he goes out to the edge. And so I think that what's so interesting with Trayvon and his continued development is that all of this is happening while he's been banged up with a knee injury and he has one usable hand because he's still got the cast on his one wrist.
Mm.
And I just think that when it comes to a player who is able to stop the run, get after the quarterback, drop back in coverage. If he continues to ascend at this trajectory, and if Anthony Campanelli is back as the defensive coordinator next year and isn't plucked by some team, God help us, like you can't convince me otherwise that like Trayvon Walker could stake his claim as being one of those guys that no one else in the National Football League can do what he does.
Yeah, he is starting to take over games. I saw someone say it on Twitter, so but I'll repeat it. Like he used to be able to like kind of take over like drives or just have like a crazy splash play like a couple of times per game. But at this point, like he's truly like wrecking game plans and like opposing offense coordinators. I absolutely have to circle his name early in the week when they're game planning against the Jaguars. It would be completely unfair of me to like give credit to the Jaguars' number one ranked run defense to one person, but if I had to, it would be Trayvon Walker. Though, like he's just unbelievably good at containing the edge. There was one play where he was lined up in a four eye, like you said, which is a little bit more inside the line of scrimmage. But he still maintained his like gap integrity, and like the Jonathan Taylor looks like he was running inside the whole way. So it would have been so easy for Trayvon to kind of just shed his block and try to go after Jonathan Taylor. But instead, like, he stayed patient, like contained the edge. Jonathan Taylor eventually had to bounce the ball outside, and Trayvon was there for an easy tackle for loss. And so it goes to show how good Trayvon is, but also to show like the amount of trust that like he has with his teammates, as teammates have with him, etc. It's definitely the communication and the trust are kind of at like all-time highs in terms of Jaguars defenses that I've watched, I guess since 2017 for sure. So yeah, Trayvon is absolutely a great shout, certainly super deserving. I think one player who's now getting more recognition, unlike Trayvon, is Parker Washington. He just went on Chad Ochocinco and Shannon Sharp's show. But in the past 3 weeks, he ranks third in receiving yards behind only Puka Nacua and Chris Olave. He also ranks third in yards after the catch in that span behind only Puka and Bijan Robinson. It's partly because he has 2 games, back-to-back games with 100 receiving yards. But even since, let me find the stat actually, just to make sure I don't butcher it. But let's see, Jags stats since week 11, so when the Jaguars' win streak began and when Jacoby Myers was in a full-time role, Parker Washington ranks third in yards per route run, fourth in yards per reception, and fifth in PFF receiving grade among 91 qualifying wide receivers in that span. So
He's ninth overall, by the way, the entire season in PFF offensive grades.
there you go. So
Yeah.
like it hasn't just been the past 3 weeks. It hasn't even just been the past 7 weeks. It's been the entire season. And like I like this is again like someone that's probably going under the radar nationally because I think locally like kind of everyone knows that Parker Washington is that guy, especially what we saw from him during the offseason. Like I think he was one of, if not the biggest kind of like risers or like most improved players during the offseason training programs. And so just shout out to Parker Washington because I think it like what's so great about it is that like it's it's so invaluable to be able to have like multiple viable receivers. Like what the Seahawks are doing right now, where they have Jackson Smith and Jigba and then nobody else is like that is not like I mean, I know they're winning a lot of
I
football
say
games,
Raheem
but
Shaheed is not nobody. Come on
that's
now. At
true.
least he's a
Well,
burner.
he hasn't made as much of an impact as I would have thought after the
Yeah.
trade for him at the deadline. I thought that was a pretty nice deal, but he is I feel like he's been more effective on special teams, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Special teams is important, but yeah. But my point is that like JSN has like a 40% target share, and then it's everyone else,
Yeah.
and like maybe it's JSN and then Shaheed and everyone else. But even still, it's like having a clear number one and a clear number two, and then like nothing else really that reliable after that is not great. I think you see that like because of like how important passing offenses is in the NFL, modern NFL, like a lot of really good teams have 2-star receivers, the Eagles, the Dolphins before Tyreek got hurt, the Bengals, the Vikings, if you think Addison is that guy, et cetera, et cetera. But for the Jaguars, like even if they don't have like a number one superstar like we thought Brian Thomas was. Like I don't think anyone's going to give Jacoby Myers an All-Pro vote. They don't really have guys that are going to rack up the accolades, but because they have Thomas and Myers and Parker Washington, and then throw in Brenton Strange in there too, like it's just a very well-rounded group. And so the fact that like in any given game, Trevor Lawrence can target like this guy 6 times and this guy 3 times and then flip-flop it, it's a really big deal, and I think it's really going to help them during the playoffs.
Which go back to the 2018 Rams, the team that made the Super Bowl, finished second to the New England Patriots, the first Rams team that Liam Cohen was a part of as an assistant wide receivers coach. And who were the wide receivers that year? Yes, you had an emerging Cooper Kupp who eventually would go on to earn all pro votes, but you had Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks, two of the more reliable sound receivers of this generation, but not two guys who were earning Pro Bowl bids year in and year out. And I think you're seeing a similar scenario play out here in Jacksonville before our very eyes. Because I know our time is short, I do want to throw these stats at you, Gus. This is
Okay.
from our friend Dan Griffiths over at Action News Jax. Monteric Brown has allowed a 31.3% completion percentage the last 4 weeks. He has allowed 36 total yards. He has 4 pass breakups, a 14.6 NFL rating. That is a lower NFL rating compared to when you spike the football. So just impressive stuff from the former seventh round pick. And then Jarian Jones, after Jordan Lewis's season ending injury, has allowed a 40% completion percentage. He has, of course, 2 picks in the last 2 weeks. He has allowed an 8.3 NFL rating, according to PFF. So just two studs in the defensive secondary for the Jaguars. And that's not even including Antonio Johnson, who also has really emerged in his third season.
Yeah, I also want to shout out Jordan Lewis just because when you were talking about Pro Bowl snubs earlier, like Devin Lloyd and Josh Hines Allen are probably the first two names that come to mind for kind of anyone when thinking about Jaguars snubs. But Jordan Lewis has been incredible this season up until he got injured. He was banged up kind of halfway through the year too, and so I think that's maybe part of the reason he's kind of under discussed or under the radar. But when you consider like the impact that he made like in the locker room and as a leader, but then also like the performance that he had on the field, there's a stat called yards allowed per coverage snap, which I think is like generally regarded as the best metric for cornerbacks. Kind of like yards per route run is generally regarded as the best metric for wide receivers. But in that cornerback metric, Jordan Lewis ranks first among all cornerbacks, regardless of whether it's slot or outside. Just among all quarterbacks, Jordan Lewis is first in that snap. He also has had a good amount of like deflections and interceptions, especially in high leverage moments, especially early in the season. He had one or two that kind of uh, clinched the game for the Jaguars. And so I think, especially since he's been like out of the lineup kind of recently and hasn't been a huge part of this like winning streak for the Jaguars, his kind of value or role maybe went a little bit under the radar. But just want to shout out Jordan Lewis, shout out all the guys, shout out to the Jacksonville Jaguars as they continue to march to the 2025-26 playoffs. Like Mia said, make sure to pack the bank on Sunday. They definitely deserve town support. So be there, be square. Mia, thank you so much for joining today. We'll have you back at some point in the year 2026. But Happy New Year to you. And if you have any other closing thoughts.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Gus. I know our time is short, but at the same time, I love how we thought we would be talking playoffs, and we are talking playoffs here in Duval, but we're not talking playoffs. So
Yeah, exactly.
we will we will save the matchup talk. We're not going to speculate who's the best matchup for the Jags because I will just tell you from every person I have spoken to at the Miller Electric Center, they've echoed the same ethos. Roll the ball out, tell us where to play. We will play anyone, and I truly believe they could beat anyone at this juncture.
That's right. 1 week at a time. So we'll be 1 week at a time. You can catch Duval 22 podcast. We'll be back next week. Check out Mia on ESPN Radio, Action News Jacks, Action Sports Jacks, excuse me, X, Blue Sky, etc. All right, guys. Appreciate it. Catch y'all next time. Happy New Year.